I never thought the worst day of my week would end up being the day that turned everything upside down. It was a Tuesday. One of those dragging, gray Tuesdays where nothing goes right and everything feels like it's moving through wet concrete. My tie had been loose since noon. My coffee had gone cold sometime around 9 in the morning, and I hadn't bothered to reheat it because I kept thinking I'd get a break soon. I never did. Call after call, client after client, all of them frustrated, all of them asking me why their divorce paperwork was taking so long. Like I could just snap my fingers and make a judge sign off faster. I was a family law attorney in Madison, Wisconsin, and some days that felt less like a career and more like a punishment. I was sitting at my desk staring at my computer screen when my paralegal, Donna, knocked on my door. She had this look on her face. Not her usual look. Something different. Something I couldn't quite read. "Jake," she said, "there's a woman here to see you. No appointment. She says it's urgent." I almost told her to reschedule whoever it was. I had 3 emails to answer, a court filing due by 5, and absolutely zero energy left in my body. But something about Donna's expression made me stop. She'd been working with me for 4 years. I'd never seen her look like that before. "Send them in," I said. I turned back to my keyboard. I didn't even look up when the door opened. I was halfway through typing a response about a filing deadline when I heard it.
Jaka.
2 words. That's all it took. My fingers stopped moving. My brain stopped working. Every single thought I had just disappeared. Like someone had pulled a plug somewhere deep inside my chest. I knew that voice. I hadn't heard it in almost 8 years. But I knew it the same way you know the smell of rain before it hits the ground. You just know. I looked up slowly, and there she was, Amy Calloway. She was standing in my doorway wearing a cream-colored sweater and jeans, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, falling softly the way it always had. She looked the same, a little older, maybe, a little more tired around the eyes, but still her. Still the woman who used to sit at the head of a kitchen table in a house on Birchwood Lane and ask me about my future like it actually mattered to her. Still the woman who made Sunday dinners that smelled like garlic and butter and something warm I couldn't name. Still the woman I had been completely, silently, helplessly in love with since I was 22 years old. I should explain that part. Amy wasn't just some woman from my past. She was Brett Calloway's mom. Brett, who was my best friend all through college. Brett, who I used to spend weekends with freshman year when the dorms felt too loud and too small. I'd sit at that kitchen table in their house eating whatever Amy had made, and somewhere between the second cup of coffee and the walk back to the car, I'd realize my heart was doing something it had no business doing. I never told Brett. I never told anyone. I just carried it quietly, the way you carry something you know you can't put down but also can't show anyone. Then Amy and her husband Dennis moved to Chicago. Brett got a job out west. Life moved on the way life does, and I buried it so deep I almost convinced myself it was gone. Almost. "Amy," I started to say, then caught myself.
Sorry. Prime just.
She gave me a small, tired smile. "Hey, long time." "Yeah." I stood up too fast and nearly knocked my cold coffee across a stack of papers. I grabbed it just in time, but some of it still sloshed onto the edge of a document. Smooth. Really professional. "Long time," I repeated like an idiot. "I know this is strange," she said, stepping into the office and closing the door behind her. "Showing up like this without calling. I almost didn't come. I sat in my car outside for 20 minutes trying to talk myself out of it." "What changed your mind?" She looked at me for a moment. I didn't have anyone else I could trust. Those words hit somewhere I wasn't expecting. She sat down across from my desk and started talking. Her marriage to Dennis had been falling apart for years, she said. They tried to hold it together, tried counseling, tried distance, tried everything couples try when they already know deep down that it's over but aren't ready to say it out loud yet. She'd finally filed for divorce 3 months ago. Dennis had refused to cooperate. He was dragging his feet on everything, the house, the finances, all of it. Her current lawyer wasn't pushing back hard enough, and she was starting to feel like she was losing ground every week. She found my name online. She said she recognized it immediately. "I didn't know you were in family law," she said. But once I saw your name, I knew I needed to call you. I sat very still and listened to all of it. I took notes. I asked the right questions. I did everything a good lawyer is supposed to do in an intake meeting. But underneath all of that, underneath the legal pad and the professional nods, my mind was somewhere else entirely. It was back in that kitchen on Birchwood Lane. It was back at 22, watching her laugh at something Brett said, thinking to myself that I had never in my life seen anyone more beautiful. She was going through one of the hardest things a person can go through. She needed help. Real help. Not whatever mess of feelings I was currently trying to keep off my face. I know we haven't spoken since Brett's graduation party, she added quietly. I know it's been years. But Jake, I need someone in my corner who actually cares what happens to me. She looked at me then, straight at me, with those steady eyes that had always made me feel like she could see things other people couldn't. Every smart, reasonable part of my brain knew what the right answer was. It was the same answer I'd have given any other lawyer who described this situation to me over lunch. Refer her out. Keep it clean. Don't do this to yourself. I'll take your case, I said. The smile that broke across her face was slow and tired and completely relieved. She reached across the desk and took my hand. Thank you, Jake. Seriously. Her hand was warm. I felt that warmth all the way through. What I didn't say, as I sat there holding her hand and promising to help her, was that I had never fully gotten over her. What I didn't say was that her walking through that door had felt like something coming back to life inside me that I'd spent years pretending was dead. What I didn't say was that I was already, without question, in way over my head. We scheduled a follow-up meeting for the end of the week. She wanted to meet at a coffee shop downtown. Somewhere that felt less like a legal office and more like two people just talking. I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was already there when I arrived. That surprised me. I had gotten to the coffee shop 11 minutes early, which was something I always did. A habit I'd had since college that I could never quite shake. I'd picked a corner table near the window, ordered a black coffee, and sat down with my legal pad like I was calm and prepared and completely fine. I was not calm. I was not fine. But I was prepared, which would have to be enough. I saw her through the glass before I walked in, and for just a second I stood on that sidewalk, watching her wrap both hands around a ceramic mug the way she always had, like she was trying to pull the warmth out of it directly. Her blonde hair was down, catching the gray afternoon light. She was looking out the window at something across the street, with that quiet, still expression she got when she was thinking hard about something she hadn't figured out yet. I had seen that expression 100 times across a dinner table when I was in college. I took a breath and went inside. "You're early," I said, pulling out the chair across from her. She looked up and smiled, and something in my chest did something I told it not to do. "I'm always early now," she said. "Dennis used to make us late to everything. I think being on time is my way of reminding myself that things are different." That was the first thing she said to me that morning, and it told me more about her marriage than an hour of paperwork could have. We started with the case. That was the right thing to do, and we both knew it. I walked her through what I'd reviewed, asked about the house in Chicago, the shared accounts, Dennis's most recent demands through his lawyer. She answered everything clearly and carefully. She had done her homework. She came with a folder of documents, everything organized and labeled, and I found myself thinking that she had always been like that. Thorough, steady, quietly sharp in a way that caught you off guard if you weren't paying attention. We worked through the legal side of things for about 30 minutes. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and something shifted in her face. Not fear exactly. More like exhaustion mixed with frustration. "Dennis," she said, and declined the call. "How often does he call?" I asked. "Depends on the day. Sometimes 3 or 4 times. Sometimes more." She set the phone face down. "He doesn't say anything threatening. He just wants to remind me he's still there. That I haven't gotten rid of him yet. That's still a form of pressure, Amy." "I know." She picked up her mug again. "I've gotten good at ignoring it. That's probably not healthy, but it's where I am right now." The call came again 30 seconds later. She declined it again without looking at the screen. I wrote something on my legal pad. She watched me write it. Are you noting that he called twice in under a minute? She asked. I'm noting everything, I said. Every call, every message, every time he shows up somewhere he shouldn't. It matters more than people think. She was quiet for a moment. You know what's strange? You're the first person who's made me feel like the details matter. My last lawyer kept telling me to focus on the big picture. But the details are what's been wearing me down. I looked up from my notes. The details are the big picture. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She looked at me for a beat longer than necessary. Then she looked back at her coffee. After that, the conversation loosened. We stopped talking about the case the way lawyers and clients talk about cases and started just talking. She told me she'd been doing freelance interior design work from home for the past few years, building something that was entirely hers. She talked about it with this quiet pride that made it obvious how much it meant to her. I told her about my practice, the cases I'd won, the ones that still bothered me at 3 in the morning, the apartment I'd moved into 2 years ago with the view of the Capitol Dome that I still wasn't totally used to. 2 hours passed like 20 minutes. When we finally stood to leave and walked out onto the sidewalk together, neither of us moved toward our cars right away. It was getting dark earlier now, the sky already going purple at the edges, and the air had that sharp, clean smell that comes in October in Wisconsin. Thank you for today, she said. Not just the legal stuff. For listening. You don't have to thank me for that. She tilted her head slightly. Brett always said you were a good listener. He said you were the kind of person who remembered things. Hearing Brett's name out loud between us felt strange. Not bad. Just real. A reminder of how layered this whole thing already was. How is he? I asked. Good. Happy. He's got a life out in Portland now, him and his girlfriend. He doesn't know I came to find you. She paused. I wasn't sure how to explain it. I wasn't sure either. She pulled her jacket tighter and looked at me sideways. Same time next week? I'll have a draft response to Dennis's lawyer ready by then. Good. She started toward her car, then stopped and turned back. The streetlight caught her hair and she looked, for just a moment, exactly like she had the last time I'd seen her at Brett's graduation party. Standing in a parking lot saying goodbye like she didn't know it would be the last time for years. Jake, she said. Yeah. I'm really glad I found you again. Even with all of this mess. I'm glad it was you. I stood on that sidewalk and watched her drive away. The October air was cold and my coffee had been finished an hour ago, and I had a court filing due in the morning and at least 4 emails I hadn't answered. None of that was what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the way she'd said it. Not like a client thanking her lawyer. Like something more than that. Something older than that. Something neither of us had said out loud yet, but that was sitting in the space between us every single time we were in the same room. I walked back to my car, started the engine, and sat there for a minute before pulling out. I knew exactly what was happening. I also knew I wasn't going to stop it. She didn't show up to our next meeting. No call. No text. Nothing. I sat at that corner table in the coffee shop for 25 minutes with a black coffee going cold in front of me. Checking my phone every few minutes like that would somehow make it ring. Didn't. I told myself she probably just got held up. Traffic, maybe. A work call that ran long. Something simple with an easy explanation. I packed up my legal pad, left a tip on the table, and walked back to my office trying not to read into it. Then, at noon, Donna knocked on my door again. Same look as before. That look that meant something was off. Amy Calloway is here, she said carefully. She's in the waiting area. Jake. She doesn't look great. I was already moving before Donna finished the sentence. Amy was sitting in one of the chairs by the window, hunched forward with her elbows on her knees. Her blonde hair was loose but tangled, like she hadn't thought about it that morning. She was wearing a gray hoodie she'd grabbed without thinking. She had a bruise on her left forearm. Small. Faded at the edges, already turning yellow. But there. I sat down beside her. Not across from her. Right next to her. Hey, I said. Talk to me. She looked up and I could see she hadn't slept. Her eyes were dry, which almost made it worse. Like she'd already used up all the tears and was running on something quieter and harder now. Dennis came to my apartment last night, she said. Her voice was steady but thin. He didn't call first. He just showed up. I opened the door because I thought it was my neighbor. She borrows things sometimes. She stopped. He wasn't violent. I want to be clear about that. He didn't hit me, but he grabbed my arm when I tried to close the door, and he held it too hard, and he said things that I don't want to repeat in a law office waiting room. I looked at the bruise on her forearm. She noticed me looking and pulled her sleeve down. "Amy," I said quietly, "that bruise tells a different story than the word didn't." She pressed her lips together and said nothing. "We're filing for an emergency protective order today," I said. "Not next week. Not after the next hearing. Today. I don't want to make it bigger than it is. It's already as big as it is. You just haven't let yourself see it yet." That landed. I could see it in the way her shoulders dropped slightly, like something she'd been holding up finally gave way. She nodded once, slowly, and that was enough. We spent the next 2 hours in my office. I filed the emergency paperwork while she sat across from me and walked me through everything in order. The calls, the incidents, the things Dennis had said over the past few weeks that she had been quietly cataloging in a notes app on her phone because some part of her had known this moment was coming. She handed me her phone and I read through 3 months of documentation. Dates, times, exact words. She had been building a record without even fully realizing that's what she was doing. "You should have been a lawyer," I said. "I just didn't want to feel crazy." Writing things down made them feel real. They are real. Every single one of them. By the time we finished, it was late afternoon. The light through my office window had gone from white to gold to the deep orange that only happens in October in Wisconsin. I walked her out to her car because I didn't want her walking alone in the parking garage. She let me, which told me more about how shaken she was than anything she'd said inside. At her car, she turned around and looked at me for a long moment. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Go ahead. Brett told me once, a long time ago, that you used to come to family dinners and then go quiet on the drive home. He said he always wondered what you were thinking about." She tilted her head. "I think I always knew. I just didn't let myself think about it too hard. My heart did something inconvenient." "What made you think about it now?" I asked. "Because the way you looked at me in that waiting room today," she said quietly, "was the same way you used to look at me across that kitchen table, like I was someone worth looking at." She paused. "Dennis stopped looking at me like that a very long time ago." I didn't say anything. There was too much to say, and none of it belonged in a parking garage at 5 in the evening. "Drive safe," I said finally. She got in her car. I stood there until her taillights disappeared around the corner of the garage. Then I went back upstairs, sat down at my desk, and stared at the wall for a solid 5 minutes. I called my colleague Greg Harmon when I got home that night. Greg was a sharp divorce attorney who worked 2 floors below me in the same building. We'd sent each other referrals before. I trusted him completely. "Hypothetically," I said, "what would you say if I told you I was developing feelings for a client?" He didn't even pause. "I'd say hypothetically isn't doing the work you wanted to do in that sentence. And I'd say refer them out before it gets complicated." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table for a long time thinking about Amy's face in that waiting room, about the bruise on her arm, about the notes app on her phone, 3 months of quiet documentation because she needed something to make her feel like she wasn't imagining things. She had been carrying all of that alone. The next morning I called her before she called me. I told her the protective order had been granted. I told her Dennis had been officially served. I told her she was safe in a legal sense, which was the only kind of safe I could promise her right now. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then she said, "Jake, can we meet somewhere that isn't the coffee shop or your office? Somewhere that just feels like outside." I knew a spot, a bench at Olbrich Park that looked out over the water, tucked under a wide oak tree where it was quiet even when the rest of the park wasn't. I went there sometimes when a case was sitting too heavy on me, when I needed to remember that the world was bigger than whatever was sitting on my desk. "I know a place," I said. "Good," she said softly. "I'll meet you there." I should have known, standing in my kitchen with the phone in my hand, that whatever was going to happen next was going to be the thing I couldn't take back. I went anyway. She was already sitting on the bench when I got to Olbrich Park. The oak tree behind her had gone orange and red, the way Wisconsin trees do in late October, like they're trying to get one last thing right before winter shuts everything down. The lake was flat and silver. A few geese were moving slowly near the far bank. Everything was quiet in that particular way that only happens on weekday mornings in a park when most people are somewhere else being busy. Amy had her hands wrapped around a to-go cup. She'd brought two. She held one out to me when I got close enough, and I took it without saying anything and sat down beside her. We didn't talk about the case right away. We just sat there for a few minutes, looking at the water. The geese moved. A leaf came off the oak tree and landed on the path in front of us. The coffee was warm and tasted like the dark roast from the shop on Williamson Street, which meant she had driven out of her way to get it, which meant she had thought about this more than she was going to say. "I've been thinking about what I said in the parking garage," she said finally. "Which part?" "The part where I basically told you I knew how you felt about me back then." She looked down at her cup. "I don't usually say things like that. I'm not usually that direct." "What made you say it?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because I'm 46 years old and I just got a bruise on my arm from my almost ex-husband, and I spent half the night reading through a notes app to make sure I wasn't crazy. And I thought, if not now, when? If I can't be honest now, after all of this, then what was any of it for?" That question sat between us in the cold October air, real and heavy and impossible to brush aside. "Brett told me something once," I said carefully. "He said you always knew things before other people did. That you were good at reading rooms. Reading people." "Brett talks too much," she said, but she was almost smiling. "He told me that at graduation, right before you and Dennis left the party early." I paused. "I watched your car pull out of the parking lot and I thought, that's the last time." And it was. She turned to look at me then, fully, in the way that she had in the parking garage, in the way she had across that kitchen table 20 years ago when I was just a college kid eating her food and trying not to feel things I had no business feeling. "Were you in love with me?" she asked. "Back then." "I need to hear you say it." The direct question hit me somewhere unguarded. "Yes," I said. "Completely. For a long time." She breathed out slowly. "I wasn't unhappy because of you. I want to be clear about that. I made my own choices. I walked into that marriage with my eyes open, or at least I thought they were." She looked back at the water. "But there were nights, a lot of them, where I'd be lying awake and I'd think about the road I didn't take. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly, the way you think about a door you walked past." "Amy, I'm not finished," she said gently. "I came to your office because I needed a lawyer I could trust. That was true. But it wasn't the only reason. And I've been sitting with that for weeks now, trying to figure out if I was allowed to have that other reason or if it made me some kind of mess of a person." "It doesn't make you a mess. I'm going through a divorce, Jake. I showed up at your office without an appointment. I'm technically your client. I'm Brett's mom." She let out a short, tired laugh. "The list is long." "I know what the list looks like," I said. "I've been reading it every night before I fall asleep." That made her go quiet. She looked at me again. "What do you do with it?" she asked. "The list. Same thing I do with every case that feels too complicated to win. I stop looking at the whole thing at once and I start with what I know for certain." "And what do you know for certain?" I set my coffee down on the bench beside me. "I know that I referred your case to Greg Harmon this morning. I called him before I drove here. He's already expecting your call. He'll take better care of the legal side of this than I could right now, and that's the truth." She stared at me. "You already did that?" "I did it because I couldn't keep being your lawyer and also be someone who feels the way I feel about you. That's not fair to you." I looked at her. "You deserve someone fully in your corner. On both counts." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took my hand the way she had across my desk that first day. Except this time neither of us was pretending it was something else. "Brett is going to have thoughts about this," she said. "I know. I'll talk to him. He loves you. I know that too. I'm counting on it." She laughed softly. It was the first full, real laugh I'd heard from her since she walked into my office, and it did something to the air around us, loosened something that had been wound tight for weeks. The divorce finalized 4 months later. Greg handled it the way I knew he would, cleanly and without drama. Dennis stopped pushing once he realized there was nothing left to push against. Amy got the house, the accounts, and most importantly her name back on her own terms. I talked to Brett on a Thursday night at a bar on State Street. I told him the whole thing from the beginning. The dinners at Birchwood Lane, the years of saying nothing, Amy walking into my office. He listened without interrupting, which was not like him, and when I finished he sat back and looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "You better not hurt her." I told him I didn't plan to. He nodded once. "Then we're fine." On the day Amy's divorce was official, I picked her up outside the courthouse. She was wearing a blue dress and she looked lighter than I had ever seen her. Not happy in a loud way. Happy in a deep way, the kind that comes from finally putting something down that you carried too long. I had a small box on the passenger seat. She opened it and found a silver bracelet with a tiny pen charm on it. She looked at me sideways. "You used to steal my pens in the library when I was studying," I said. "Junior year. You never once gave one back." She burst out laughing, eyes going bright, and then she was crying a little too, the way people do when something hits them right in the place they weren't guarding. "I love it," she said. "I love you." 8 years. One sentence. "I love you too," I told her. "I've loved you since I was 22 years old, and I plan on doing it for a very long time." She put the bracelet on and held her wrist up in the afternoon light. Then she looked over at me with that steady, quiet expression that had always made me feel like she could see straight through whatever I was pretending to be. "Take me somewhere," she said. "Where?" "Anywhere. Anywhere that's just ours." I started the car. We had taken every long road to get here. Every detour, every wrong turn, every year of silence. But sitting next to her with the city moving past the windows and her hand in mine, I didn't wish for a single shortcut. Some things are worth the long way around. She was always one of them,